Okay, perfect. So you let us know, Rick. What are we talking about today?
Well, to look back on what we were saying is that in terms of story and creating that story, you have the stories. Now let's look at the structure of what the story is. Stories are beginning, middle, and end. Simple, and that goes can be put into a way of thinking of writing as building blocks. Building blocks are one person telling a story. Another person adds to the story, becomes dialogue. One person, monologue, two people, dialogue. More than two people, or just two people, scene. Scene breaks into scene one, scene two, scene three, scene four, act break, and then scene five, scene six, scene seven, scene eight, conclusion, completion for that story. And if you think of writing in that way, you start to break it down in a different format. You can see it as digestible pieces on a board, like a meal. You start off with a meal. You can start off when they say the term soups to nuts or things like that is was actually how people ate meals. At first they have a soup and then they have this and they end with a dessert or nuts. And they're looking at that. Um, you're making a meal. And to make that meal, you want it to be something that people find um, tasteful, intriguing. You can give them color. They say when people eat, that you eat first by your eyes. You see the meal, and that's how, as a story structure, you have to look at it. You first of all see the meal, then you can break it up into digestible parts, or how someone would consume a meal. Same as in writing. You're the chef, and this is the beginning of the meal, and the meal is the monologue. The monologue nearly always starts off most stories. One speaker talking about the hero, the monologue. One speaker talking about the hero. And each one becomes a different point of view, a different subject, looking at the monologue and looking at the hero and looking at the story. Think of it that way. And for all purposes, is the monologue is the easiest thing to start with. It's one person speaking, it's you, or another character speaking. So you have one voice, one clear, distinct voice. That's the monologue. And then the monologue's created, you go into the scene, which is the dialogue, and then an extra scene. And then as it gets more complicated and more complex and more obstacles that this person has to overcome to achieve their goal, that's the storyline. That's the track that your train will be on for the story. So when I first started off performing as an actor, I was a Shakespearean actor. And so, being a Shakespearean actor, I really looked at Shakespeare's plays. And I couldn't perform a scene to get a job. I could always perform a monologue. My first job actually was Romeo and Romeo and Juliet. And there I was, a young kid coming out of high school, applying to the Old Globe Theater in San Diego years ago. And I came in and I said, I'd like to read a monologue. I would like to perform a monologue. And I said, let me perform Shakespeare. And it was this Romeo and Juliet. Well, right what you know, I'm a young 17-year-old kid, as close to the character as possible. I was doing what I knew. And in that monologue, it was Romeo's monologue where he's looking at Juliet's balcony saying, but softwood like the yonder window breaks is the east and Juliet is the sun. That was the beginning. And he's looking at this beautiful woman, and then she appears. He sees his love. In that moment, that brand new teenage love, the same emotion over generations is the exact same thing as a young kid in love looks and says, a softwood light through yonder window breaks is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon who sick and pale with grief that thou her maid art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, her vestal liveries, but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. It is my love. It is my love. Bam, that moment, he sees her. Beginning, middle, and end. That starts it off. That's the prelude to this monologue. And monologue, in many ways, reflects story and says, hey, you see the DNA of storytelling is wrapped in a monologue of beginning, middle, and end, of events that are escalating. Look how that escalated. But soft light to yonder window breaks. He sees it. It is my love. It's escalated. It's escalated. The drama's escalated. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? This is just my memory as being a 17-year-old kid, remembering that monologue back in the day. And thinking back now as I'm older and seeing how, as a writer, that monologues, how they start and the DNA. And that's what I want us to learn today, the DNA of the monologue. Because if you know the monologue, you can start to easily go the story. And that's the one thing we want to show in writing. If someone looks at a script, it looks insurmountable. How am I going to write this script? How am I going to do this? I always say, I don't like to write. I like to have been written. I wrote this. Wow, it's done. It's completion. It's finished. The writing process is the hard process. And one of the things I like to say to make it easier is that is that um, is that to make it easier, you have to break it into small, digestible chunks, things that are easy. If I told you, hey, we're going to go on this journey, you need to travel, we're going to travel 5,000 miles across the United States. Oh, wow. How could you do that? But if I said, you want to go on a walk with me? Oh, sure. I'm going to walk, go on a walk, do an hour. Okay, did an hour. Tomorrow, you want to do another hour? Okay, you do another hour. Next day, you want to do 2 hours. After a while, your endurance grows, your ability grows. And actually, how many times have you exercised? And afterwards, you realize, wow, I did that. How many times, like when I was a hiker as a kid, that I would go up a mountain and would just every step, I can't do this. Oh, every step I can't do this. And my inner monologue telling me, yes, you can do it. Yes, you can do it. Like the little train that, yes, you can. I did it. And once you cross one mountain and achieve that, you do another. You do another. So when you start off your writing career, when you're starting off going into writing, you may think, how can I do that? You don't. Think, how can I do this piece? How can I create a monologue? Now, I want you to create a monologue for you. We first start off saying, hi, I'm so and so, I'm a writer. Well, now you can say the next thing. How do you feel? Hi, I'm so and so, I'm a writer, and today I feel tired. Okay. Why? Because you always have to ask the question why when you're writing. Why is this person tired? Why is this character saying this? Why is this that? Why? I'm tired because I was up all night. Why? This dog is a huge dog, Charlie. Charlie. He sleeps in the bed with me. I can't get him on the ground. He's always in the bed with me. And in his mind, he owns the bed. I happen to be sleeping with him. And he moves around the night and he stands up. And if he hears something, he becomes a century and wakes me up. It's the most, annoying thing I can deal with. Well, why don't you just get rid of him? Because I can't. I love that dog. I love that dog. And you're telling this dialogue really in a monologue form. I love this dog. Wow. Well, why? Now I'm talking past history because I rescued him. I rescued him as a puppy. He was the cutest little puppy you'd ever see. He was only about this big. Now he's about 160 pounds. He's practically a person. Well, now you understand my past, why I'm doing it. You're understanding my objective, and you're understanding my motivation, my reasons why. And as I continue the monologue, yeah, I can't kick him out. And my wife told me, look after Charlie. I'm going to be gone today. He seems a little depressed. And I think to myself, and I say to her, oh, yeah, I'll look after Charlie with a sarcastic voice. Why don't you want to look after Charlie? I'm more concerned that you're more concerned about Charlie than me. Now there's more conflict. It's escalated. And she leaves. And maybe in the last part of this monologue, a conclusion. I like Charlie. I can't help it. That dog came into my life at the roughest times. And he's always been there. And sure, I understand our relationship. I have to give him 10% of my food. He's convinced me that I have to do that for some reason. He stands there with his eyes wide, asking for a scrap. I, in his mind, have to legally give him so many pieces of food. And we're now a friendship. And I think I'd be sad to lose Charlie, but I know I will because we outlive dogs. And one day I'm going to see Charlie and he'll be gone. And my life will be lesser for it. But right now, I'm angry that I gotta look after Charlie, who demands food, who barks at everything, who is always constantly scared of firecrackers and things like that and keeps me up at night. But my life would be a little more empty without him. Conclusion. So you're seeing that. This is just me improvising a simple monologue. And you can do the same thing. When you introduce yourself, hi, I'm so and so. How are you doing today? And this is also what we do in terms of speech writing. Is that the character needs to be relating to the audience, and that's partially in a strange way showing your humanity, your vulnerability. I'm so and so. I feel this way. This is who I am. This is where I'm going. This is what my conclusion is. And if you look at even Shakespeare, Hamlet's "To be or not to be," and let's look at that. To be or not to be, that is the question. To be or not to be, that is the question. To be or not to be, that is the question. What does it mean to be or not to be? Why? To be, to be human, to be alive, or not to be alive. That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep. No more. And by a sleep to say we end the heartache that 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to, 'tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. Aye, there's the problem. That's what he's saying. Aye, there's the rub. There's the problem. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. That's the respect. We don't know what's going to happen when we die. It may not be that we dream. It may be the end when we shuffled off this mortal coil, the coil around it. Look how Shakespeare is using words and images. To say to die, to all the things that we, flesh, is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. People are praying to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. You may not dream. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we've shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. That's the respect that makes calamity of a so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of osses, then the spurns that patient merits of unworthies takes. It's naming all these things that's going on in life. And you break it down. It makes a calamity of so long life that makes us live this story for so long. To grunt and sweat under a weary life. That's what he's doing. That's a classical monologue. Classical monologue is speaking to himself. speaking to God, speaking to the audience. Three different points of views he's speaking to in monologue form. God. Because in their time, looking at them as writers, they believed in God. There was never a question in their mind. And Shakespeare's looking at it, he comes from that world where he spoke Greek and read Latin and all those different things that he most likely had through his education, with a working vocabulary far greater than ours and words more that they played with and used. I mean, if you look at the way people write, you think of Civil War letters written to home, beautiful letters. My dear Molly, if tomorrow I shall die, I will think about, and you can do the monologue about that, about what happens. And now you look at war stories and letters written to home nowadays, quite different. Ah, it's hell. I've got these sand fleas. I want to go home. Shakespeare would lived in a time of language, a very strong time. And now I think if we have a desire to make language happen more and more, and that's expression, that's what we want to do. This is your purpose, to write. And the monologue is one of the easiest forms to write. So first start how anything is written, beginning, and you can do it with say of who you are. That becomes the monologue. Hello, my name is Rick. I'm a writer. Ah, how'd you start to become a writer? Well, I started to be a writer years ago when I became an actor. Oh, what stopped you? Well, what stopped me was I felt I couldn't write because I read Shakespeare and I read all these great writers and I thought, how could I begin to write? And then, objective, I want to be a writer. Obstacle, my mind is telling me I can't be a writer. And then what happened? Well, I read the works of one writer that I admired and I saw some of his early works and they were horrible, horrible. And what did that teach you? Well, it taught me that sometimes you have to be bad to be great. Sometimes you have to be vulnerable and start something and not know where it's going to go and just take one step forward. Just like when you were hiking up that mountain, you thought you couldn't travel over or conquer. One step, one step, one step to finally make it to the top. And then you come down and you finally made that mountain. And you look back and it might have not been that hard, but it was in your mind. The greatest journey started with one step. One step. And this is your first step, the monologue. So as you're saying the monologue, you might sit there and say, start off with who you are. I'm a writer. Whether you're a writer or not, you're being truthful. I'm a writer. Then maybe the next thing might be true, but I don't feel I'm a really good writer. Okay. You're confessing to your audience. This is who I am. You're being vulnerable. Why do you not feel you're a good writer? Well, I've read the works of such great writers, and I think, how could I ever be that? And telling the story of your insecurity and writing it down for 5 minutes of why you think you can't write. You look at the page and discover you wrote something. You wrote something. And there it is. We're all writers. We're all storytellers. We didn't say we're great writers. We didn't say we're bad writers. We didn't say anything else. We said is we're a writer. To be or not to be, that is the question. To be or not to be. I am alive. I am human in this period, in this time, right now, in this gender, in this body, in this look, and this age. All that you are complete. You are enough. And own that. And say it. And write it. And writing will give you purpose. Right to save your life. Right to tell your story. Right to leave that story behind. When I had my brain issues, where I was in the hospital, I had to go through 3 brain surgeries. What came to me out of all that is I need to write something down for my children to know something about me that they can hold. A book. So I wrote a book. The book was called Almost White, Forced Confessions of a Latino in Hollywood. And I just want to tell them my story of working in Hollywood. The ups, the downs, the worst of and the great moments. Someone asked me, what was one of your greatest moments in Hollywood? It wasn't a moment you would imagine. A great moment for me in Hollywood is going to a studio and teaching and giving my advice to people and mentoring and working on projects and shows and all that. And at the end of the day, I would be done. Because at the end of the day, my father grew up in North Island Naval Air Station, and that's where I grew up with him. He raised me through making money at this North Island Naval Air Station. Was a naval air station. There were people were building ships and building planes, and all this stuff was going on. But at the end of the day, people start putting their tools away. They start closing up the shops, and they had worked together collectively to create all this world, and they were closing down, and the sun was setting, and that reminded me exactly what it was like in a studio. We were the creators of dreams. We were the creators of dreams, of our collective consciousness, and we had worked so hard to do that, to tell our story. And at the end of the day, we're putting away the tools, turning off the computers, turning off the lights, and walking out. And me walking out of the studio, looking around and thinking, wow, I did something. I did something. Those are the great moments. And I hope you have those moments too. And you can have that moment by writing a monologue, completing one thing. And that monologue later on will teach you how it turns into dialogue and how it turns into scenes and how the story keeps growing and growing and growing. And the story may beginning be a simple story, but as it's told, it becomes complex. As it's told, you add in certain things of what is the voice of the author? What is he saying? What is he thinking? What is he feeling? And then next you pan back and look at the character and the author, and then look at him abstractly and think, what is he thinking? Is he cold? Is he warm? What is he wearing? All these things start to become, and you start to clothe this character, and he becomes a real three-dimensional character. In this speech, Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, is a royal person with great education, but he lacks the chance to do something. He lacks the grit, or so he says. You know, oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. Is it not monstrous? This player in a fiction could have more emotion than he can have. And that's a king. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. Is it not monstrous that this player here, but in a fiction, in a dream of passion, could force a soul so to his own conceit that from her working all his visage wand, tears in his eyes, distraction, aspect, a broken voice, his whole function suiting with forms to his conceit, and all for nothing, for Hecuba, 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 Hecuba. He's talking about an actor portraying a role. That's a prince, royal person speaking that way. And he says, what's Hecuba to him, or he to Hecuba, that he should weep for her? What would he do had he the motive and the cue for passion that I have? He would drown the stage with tears and cleave the general ear with horrid speech, make mad the guilty and appall the free, confound the ignorant and amaze indeed the very faculties of eyes and ears. Yet I, a dull and muddy metal rascal, peaked like John of Dreams, I'm pregnant of my cause and can say nothing. No, not for a king upon whose property of most dear life a damned defeat was made. Am I a coward? Look what Hamlet's doing. He's exposing what he believes is a treasonous act against his father. And he looks at the audience and he's exposing himself. He's being vulnerable. And he goes, who calls me villain? Breaks my pate across, plucks off my beard, blows it in my face, tweaks me by the nose, gives me the lie in the throat as deep as to the lungs. Who does me this? Ha! Swoons. I should take it. It cannot be that I am pigeon-livered and lack gall to make oppression bid or ear. This I should have fatted all the region kites with this slave's awful bloody bawdy villain, remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain. Oh, vengeance! He gets angry. Vengeance. He wants vengeance. Oh, why? What an ass am I? I can't even do it. This is most brave, that I, the son of a dear father murdered, prompted to my revenge by heaven and hell, must like a whore unpack my heart with words and fall a cursing like a very drab, a scullion. Fie upon it. Full about my brain, I've heard that guilty creatures. And then he comes up with a plan. I have heard that guilty creatures sitting at a play have, by the very cunning of the scene, been struck so to the soul that presently they have proclaimed their malfaction. In other words, they have confessed their guilt. They have proclaimed their malfactions for murder, though it have no tongue, will speak. With most miraculous organ, I'll have these players who we talked about, or are players, they're actors, play something like the murder of my father. Before mine uncle, I'll observe his looks, I'll tempt him to the quick. If he but blench, I'll know my course, and spirit that I've seen, the ghost he saw earlier, may be the devil. The devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape, yea, and perhaps out of my weakness and my melancholy, and he is a very potent with such spirits, abuses me to damn me, I'll have grounds then. In other words, I'm not going to let this ghost, but maybe I will. The ghost could be a spirit that's trying to, the devil trying to tell me to kill my uncle. And then he says, the play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. He's going to do a play with these players in front of his king, and the king blanches and confesses his murder of his father. Then Hamlet will know exactly where to go and what to do. And then he will act. The whole problem up to this point with this character is he can't act because he's unsure of this guilt of this father or not. So you can see a character being vulnerable, being alive in the moment, being real, wrestling with all the demons in himself and putting it out there. And when you write, you may not have a character that is dealing with the murder of his father and such high things. You might have a normal person. And this next monologue we'll go over that I wrote and was performed on Broadway is the janitor monologue. And you can look at it. The janitor monologue is a monologue by one person, a janitor. The reason I think I'm so attracted to monologues and how they've helped me as a writer and helped me as an actor was I couldn't produce a play, but I could produce a monologue. If I had an audition, I couldn't show my work or show videos and things like that, but I could do a monologue in an audition in a room. So monologues were important to me, and I love monologues because of my work in Shakespeare. I got to understand monologues. But I did a show called Working when I first began my career, and Working was a bunch of monologues that were very easy. This is what you can do as a writer, is you can actually interview someone. There's two ways to do it. You can interview someone, or in this exercise I'll tell you about, you can interview someone. In other words, you meet someone, ask them questions about their life, and write it down. Where were you born? Who are you? What occupation do you have? Things that with character. When you break down a character, what does a person do? If I break down a character, I'll ask, what occupation do they have? What do they do? Oh, he's a writer, he's an actor, he's a soldier, he's all these thousand things. How old is he? Where is he from? Where's his past? What does he want? Where is he going? Where does he want to be? Who would he like to be? What's his dreams? Who does he want to be? All that's basically a character. Now, we look at ourselves, we are all characters. Shakespeare said it best. All the world's a stage. The whole world is a stage, and we're all characters. So this next monologue, I did Working, which was by Studs Terkel. He would simply ask people, what do you do? Who are you? And the monologues were about working men, a cop. a construction worker, a prostitute, a waitress, all those things. It was an occupation. What he was trying to do was to take an occupation and make a human out of that occupation. Because how many times have you walked day to day and saw people being an occupation and not a human? How many times do you do that? He's a cop. Okay, he's a cop. There it is, the word cop. Now you put in your own prejudice of what a cop means, but maybe a cop could be this. Maybe a cop could be that. We'll go back to words. What's the meaning of a word? If I say the word apple, what do you see? A red apple or a green apple? Apple. Cop, occupation, doctor, lawyer, all those different things. So what Studs Terkel did was said, I want to interview people who were working. And his whole conjecture of interviewing people in Chicago was taking every everyday man, woman, and interviewing about their job. And there's a beautiful play came out. It was called Working, a musical. And I did one of the monologues, two of them. And I was in the monologue. I remember being directed by Sam Woodhouse. And he said, tell your story. He didn't ask me to act. He asked me, as just like the person who was being interviewed, to tell their story. Tell their story. You know, when regular people tell their story, they're not being dramatic. They're not like, as Hamlet says, putting on this fake acting. What's Hecuba to him or he to her? He's saying, who are you? And when people tell who they are, it all these emotions can come out of them that they didn't expect to see. No one starts off a monologue and starts crying. Never. They tell a story. In fact, most people don't want to cry. Actors love to cry. it's emotion. But humans don't. A lot of times the artificiality of an actor is he's being dramatic. He's playing all these things. The truth is, most of the time, it's actually the opposite. You talk to a 911 operator. He's not going to be upset. Okay, what's the 911? What's the emergency? Okay, let me figure this out. They're not, oh my God, what happened? We have to we'll have to figure this out. I don't know what to do. I'm a 911 operator. I'm terrified. They're professional. So most people who are talking about their occupations are professional too. Many times you can end up crying, you can end up feeling something else, but no one started a story ever wanting to cry. That's artificial, that's being an actor, that's all those things. Real people don't. Real people actually, the complication, the obstacle for them to speak is the emotion underneath that would make them cry. How many times have you seen a character trying to explain something, they're crying, and they're fighting crying because it's too important to tell the story versus feel the emotion? So in the story, the janitor, I was watching the horrible events of 911, and I got a call from a friend, Carlos Gomez, and he says, Rick, you got to write about it. You got to write about these characters and the news I'm watching in New York. And he says, you got to write about the Latinos, because I was known for writing Latino stories. And I said, well, what are you talking about, Carlos? There's no Latinos involved in 911. I'm watching CBS, ABC, NBC, those things. And they showed a sea of white faces talking about all the tragedy of 911. I didn't see a Latino talking. And Carlos simply said, look on Univision. Turn on Univision. And I turned on the Spanish-speaking channel, and I saw a story about a janitor. And that inspired me to write this monologue, The Janitor. Beginning, middle, and end. A story with completion that tells a story of a janitor during 911. So in telling the story, the janitor, and I saw an actual performance of it, of an actor who played the role, and I saw it and played on Broadway. When we do the performance, I couldn't hear a pin drop. Because it start out, the guy would start to talk as a janitor. It was a Dominican janitor. And it was full of comedy and expectation that the audience had. This is a funny guy talking about something. You had no idea that he was talking about 9/11, the World Trade Centers, and it was being spoken about on Broadway only a few miles from where it happened. The janitor. And if you take a look at the story, you look at it, you'll see beginning, middle, and end. You'll see vulnerability. You'll see truth. You'll see someone explaining their job, explaining their occupation. I'm just a janitor.
I'm not important. I don't do anything. I clean, that's what I do. You make a mess and I clean it right up. But I clean very, very, very good. I can clean everything. In Santo Domingo, you know, my friends would always ask me, hey, Jose, what are you gonna do when you grow up? You know, I say clean things as I clean very, very, very good. Besides, I was the only Dominican kid who couldn't play baseball, so what are you gonna do? You know, Santo Domingo is very muddy and wet. There's always something to clean. And I was lucky. I knew what I wanted to do. I was ambitious. I wanted to come to the United States and become a janitor. Hey, most people look all their lives for an occupation. I found mine. I clean. But I clean very, very, very good. I can clean everything. So, you know, my friends, they're always asking for advice, and they tell me, hey, Jose, do you use chemicals? You use chemicals? I say, yeah, sure. I use chemicals. I got plenty of chemicals. But did you know sometimes the natural stuff works best? Did you know nothing cleans a vomit better than sawdust? Huh. Write that down. That's a trade secret I just gave you. Oh, my first job in the United States was in an elementary school. That was good work, easy work. There's lots of sawdust there. Flu season, chilly day. Oh, I saw some bad things. I don't even like to talk about it. Okay, there was this one kid. He threw up so bad it looked like a mural. The walls were like the Sistine Chapel, only with Captain Crunch and Fruit Loops. It was bad. Oh, and there was my promotion to high school janitor. I used to take the master locker key, and I'd go into the kids' lockers and steal pot. The white kids always had the best weed. I would get high and go into the cafeteria and eat all the sloppy Joe sandwiches I wanted. Hey, when you're high, those fish sticks and the tacos, they taste really good. I had to get out of there, though, you know? Aye, there was too much violence. Óyeme, when white kids go bad, they plan it. 9 a.m. kill teachers, 9:30 a.m. kill classmates, 10:30 kill myself. No. That would never happen in East LA. See, because all the Hispanic students would know that all the other students are packing, and it'd be like a war zone in there. Blah, 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 like a Die Hard movie. Oh, yeah, besides, they would never show up on time. One would hit snooze, one would have to do something for his mother. The other one would have a really good excuse why he missed the shootout. And then I got my dream job, working in the city, head janitor of a big office building. I met a girl in that building. That was good work, easy work. I only had to do 20 floors in a day and 20 floors at night. Lots of overtime. I was working in New York City, the Big Apple, baby. It's always something to see in New York, and I would see things. Big buildings are alive. Sometimes I would walk in on bosses having sex with their secretaries, and sometimes having sex by themselves. Hey, sinvergüenza! So I always wore gloves because you never know. You never know. So I cleaned and I cleaned because I cleaned very, very, very good. And I wanted to marry her, and I did. She was from Santo Domingo, just like me. Con unos muslos. She worked upstairs in the restaurant. I worked downstairs, upstairs, everywhere. I love New York. Hey, if you can make it as a janitor there, you can make it anywhere. I was working in the morning when the first plane hit. Second plane. Fire. Smoke. Ashes. Everywhere. And they fell. My big, beautiful buildings, they fell to the ground. Why do people got to make a mess they can never clean up? Lost a lot of good friends there that day. Janitors, busboys, dishwashers. They worked upstairs in the restaurant. They will never know how many people died there that day. No one will. Lots of Latinos lost without a trace of them. They weren't reported because they were illegal. That's the word they use, illegal. It's a dirty word. You better watch out what you make illegal. Oh, you're too short? Illegal. Oh, you're wearing glasses? Illegal. Oh, you're too fat? You may be next. There's no such thing as illegal people. Some people try to clean it up and say, undocumented. Still dirty. If they'd ask me, I'd tell them what to call it. I'd tell them how to clean it up. I would just call them humans. That's clean. Like throwing sawdust and vomit. Sucks up all the bad smell. After they fell, I was there. And I was cleaning. And this big gringo comes up to me and he says, hey, what are you doing here? You're not a policeman? You're not a firefighter? Shit, you're not even an American. And I said, yo soy americano. And I clean. That's what I do. And I will be here until there is nothing left to clean. Or as long as it takes me to find my wife.
So in the monologue, he's talking about his life in the past. He's talking about where he came from. He's saying who he is. Oh, I want to be a janitor. I want to be a janitor. And the audience is looking at him saying these lines and going along with the joke, going along with the feeling. He's just a janitor. And that echoed, the working monologues I remember. All I am is just a busboy. All I am is just this. All I am is just a janitor. All I am is that. And if you talk to people about their occupation, they don't ever say anything big about it. What do you do? I'm a cop. Oh, yeah, I'm a cop. What do you do? Well, most of the time I don't do anything. I wait for things to happen. That's why we eat donuts. We're sitting around having coffee and donuts and waiting for the world to go to hell. Waiting to run toward gunfire instead of away from it. Waiting to have people hate us and disparage us because some idiot cop that they met years ago is the only cop they see in front of them. All we're doing, so it's people having great stories to tell, and you have great stories to tell. And in the monologue, and you can look at the monologue, he's talking about, I don't like to talk about me being a janitor. I don't like to say that. And he's talking about, hey, when I was a janitor, I worked at a high school. He's talking about working in the high school, and it's comical. And he says, I had to get out of the high school. Too much violence in high school. Too much violence. That Columbine thing scared me. The hell out of me, man. When white kids go bad, they plan it. Bowling in the morning, 8 a.m. PE class, 9 a.m. Kill all my classmates, 10 a.m. Kill teachers, 10:20. Kill myself, 10:25. Ay, carajo, I won't do it. And he talks about that. So you're following this monologue and you're hearing about his vulnerability, what he's worried about, what he thinks, all that stuff, with a sarcastic, caustic wit. Because a lot of people are very funny when they write. It's only us as the audience will look at it and see the comedy. Most people, a janitor is brilliant mind. Don't see him as an occupation, see him as a human. Don't see him as an occupation, see him as a man. Don't see him as a Dominican, see him as a human. Don't see him with, take it out, get deeper and deeper into these characters that you bring out their humanity, and their humanity is shared by one another. That's how you do characters, show who they are. And it's truthful. So he starts to talk about, and then one of the things he says, he talks about working in a building. We don't know where that building is. Says, he goes, I work in a building. I like living in the Sin City, the big manzana. Big manzana, that means apple. He's saying, I live in the New York, the big manzana, the big apple. And working in the city, I needed an angel like her who he met. He's talking about his wife now. I see all sorts of things. I walk in on bosses doing cocaine on their desks or having sex with their secretaries on their desk, and sometimes just having sex by themselves. I sin vergüenza. Shameful. Look at these people. Shameful. And he starts looking, and all of a sudden, the lights on stage reveal a building, 2 buildings. And he goes, it takes a beat. He doesn't want to be emotional. He's telling a story about his job, being a janitor. He goes, I remember those buildings. I was cleaning up that morning when the first plane hit. What a mess. There was smoke and dust everywhere. Then a second plane hit. Then they fell. My big, beautiful buildings fell to the ground. I lost all my friends there. Other janitors, bus boys, and dishwashers from the restaurant upstairs. A lot of Latinos. The restaurant upstairs was called the Windows of the World. And most people that worked there were Latino. But you're not going to hear about them on the news. They were not reported because they were illegal aliens. They were undocumented, unreported. Why do people have to make a mess they can never clean up? Next day, I came back and stayed and helped with the cleanup, and a big man comes up to me and says, why are you here? You're not a fireman. You're not a policeman, first responder. And I said, sir, I clean, sir. That's what I do. I clean. And I'm going to be here until there's nothing here to clean or until I find my wife. You couldn't hear a pin drop. Well, one of the greatest things I did is I took a janitor that I saw on a news program, and I gave him life. And I gave him a chance to be remembered. And I told the story. And in telling the story, that's what I'm asking you to do. Tell the stories, give people life, give yourself life, right to live. And that is the monologue, which will be continuing the scene and then another scene and another scene, which is the story that we're all going to write. Thank you.